Hi there, welcome to the second course of our trilogies about systemic enterprise development. In this session, we will use the example of the 5 spheres of activity in Enterneering to explain how systemic enterprise development can be structured, from the perspective of the entrepreneur or executive, and thus be implemented in practice. The 5 spheres represent different focal points in terms of content as well as a sequence of development phases. Before we set off on the path to systemic corporate development, let's take a brief look at the goal and its nature. It is important to recognize and understand that the goal is not the successful application of a single method or tool. It is about effectively applying a field of activity or discipline to bring about targeted change and continuous development of the organization's overall system. In other words, it is about practicing systemic work, which in turn requires that not only the company and its workforce change and develop, but that the responsible executives do the same. The goal is holistic, systemic corporate development. The results of this are, for example, improvement of employer branding, increasing customer centricity, practicing smart people management, creating and training transformational skills, achieving cultural and habit change, building and maintaining growth capability, and last but not least establishing future competitiveness. Does that sound valuable and important enough for you to set off? Then let's start with the 5 spheres of activity. For us, the effective examination of systemic enterprise development takes place in 5 consecutive and partially overlapping spheres of activity. On the road to success, the right sequence is just as important as the appropriate scope of the work. Each person has different prerequisites and a personal background of experience and maturity. Therefore, the scope and intensity of the content to be completed or dealt with in each sphere of activity always depend on each constellation. Taking shortcuts, based on insufficient reflection or incorrect judgment, harbors risks to success that should not be underestimated. Let's look at the 5 spheres. The first sphere is awareness, understanding, and classification. It comprises the following contents: understanding the characteristics and relations of the systemic approach and the discipline, knowing the main features of the approach from the processual or functional perspective as well as the emotional perspective, recognizing the relevance and objectives, and realizing the differentiation from other topics and activities within the company. In fact, by engaging with our trilogy here, you are already in the center of the first sphere. Well done. The second sphere is necessity, role understanding, and acceptance. It comprises the following contents: understanding interrelationships and cause-effect relationships, recognizing the importance of alignment and goal setting for the company's success, anticipating the dependencies on one's person, understanding the influence of personal thoughts and actions, and accepting general or hardly influenceable factors. Effective systemic management stands and falls with the personal awareness of change and the responsible person's own understanding of their role. Probably one of the most important components of the second sphere is the ability to lead oneself as the basis for successful systemic management. The third sphere is state analysis, need for action, target, and action plan. It comprises the following contents: describing and analyzing the initial situation, deriving and defining the need for action, formulating development and change objectives, and describing implementation measures. In this sphere of activity, everything revolves around the implementation-oriented definition, prioritization, and determination of measures and actions. At least 2 levels are considered here, namely the personal level of those responsible, and the level of the company organization and the people working in it. The fourth sphere is personal tasks, personality development, and leadership. It comprises the following contents: recognizing and working on tasks that cannot be delegated, deriving and defining needs for personal development, realizing personal implementation measures, and recognizing and consciously assuming leadership and self-leadership. In this sphere of activity, Everything revolves around the further development of personal maturity and skills for leadership, self-leadership, and change. Only those who continuously reflect, evaluate, and develop themselves as decision-makers, shapers, and enablers of organizations and people can effectively develop or transform companies systemically. The fifth sphere is delegation, promotion, sponsoring, and empowerment. It comprises the following contents: recognizing tasks to delegate and assigning them to suitable persons, identifying and addressing personnel and qualification requirements, recognizing and addressing inadequate working conditions, identifying and closing budget gaps, and recognizing where the empowerment of people and the organization is necessary and taking action. This final phase is about operationalizing goals, measures, and action plans. It is about turning intentions, assumptions, and findings into action and realizing things as effectively and efficiently as possible under real-life conditions. After the previous sphere was all about self-knowledge and self-development, it is now about successfully empowering others. It depends on smart delegation and on appropriately supporting, equipping, and challenging the people or parts of the organization that are responsible for the respective measure. Ideally, you will have gained a first impression by using this and the previous session of our trilogy about systemic enterprise development. Perhaps you have become even clearer about what effective enterprise development in the 21st century is really about and what the key differentiators in competition are likely to be. The third part of our trilogy is about practical implementation and a concrete sample process that leads through the 5 spheres, initiates systemic development, navigates through change and transformation, and ultimately leads to continuous development and improvement. Thank you for your attention and interest, and stay tuned.